You have a number of guys that went to the NFL out of the Texas program. Was that a recruitment, development, or?
I think it all starts with recruiting. You're not going to put a kid in the NFL just because you're a good coach. They have to have the innate ability to play at that level. So it starts with recruiting, and then obviously the kid has a lot to do with it. He's got to accept their coaching, and then he has got to develop as we go along. And then sometimes those guys, it's a little bit of being at the right time, the right place at the right time. It really is. With the NFL carrying 7, 8, sometimes a maximum of 9 offensive linemen, it's hard. It really is. They have to be at the right place, right time, and be good.
How challenging is it to identify that kind of talent at the high school level?
You know what is probably the most difficult, and even being an offensive line coach all my life, is probably the most difficult group to evaluate coming out of high school, strictly because, when you think about skill kids, they run fast or they don't. They have athleticism or they don't, that kind of thing. And it shows at an earlier level. Offensive linemen, a lot of these guys that we're evaluating heavily right now are 16 years old, going into the senior year. Now, in 2 years, what is that 16-year-old going to be like? So you have to kind of project that kid. So it's, and sometimes they grow 2 or 3 inches. I mean, it's really hard. It really is. So we try to find the guys that are as close as possible to being ready to play, and then look at the potential for them for the future.
Is the competition that they're up against also a challenge?
Sure.
Just because they're so much bigger sometimes.
There's a lot of things that's really challenging about it, because sometimes you'll get a kid that's really athletic, he's got a lot of talent, and he's in a league that's really poor, and that's tough to evaluate. I mean, sometimes they're all coached at different levels too. So sometimes guys are just really well coached, and you got to be careful because sometimes some of those are almost peaked out. Whether a kid that's really raw and comes out of an area that not very well coached, he's probably got a bigger upside. So it's a toss-up sometimes.
How frequently do you get kids in that have good technique at that?
Well, you know what? Even from Penn State to Rutgers to Ohio State, I mean, they're going to be different techniques that different coaches. We all kind of do some things the same way, but it's all a little different nuances and things like that. I have had some kids that came out of some high school programs that were really far advanced. And that's a great compliment to their coaches. They fundamentally really sound at what they do. And then I've had some that were just totally raw, and then sometimes you get position change guys. When you look at a guy, sometimes like a defensive end or a defensive lineman that is not quite fast enough, quick enough, and all to play on that side, you think, on the other side, now he may be kind of special. So that, and then he has no offensive skills coming in, because he's always been a defensive guy.
Is that a possibility here with the lack of returnees?
Well, what you always do is look at your football team, and we're all, except for Larry and Ron, we're all getting to know the guys, So you look at your football team, and you always want to distribute the talent where it's best used. And so, obviously we'll always look at some defensive linemen that they're down the depth chart, and we're not going to take a starter or a second-team guy from defense, but we'll certainly look at some guys that may have been on that side of the ball that not going to contribute as heavily there and move on to our side.
Is that a hassle, starting from scratch and coming in fresh like this, just evaluating every kid, because I'm assuming that you look at tons of film from last year and years before. I mean,
it's been a real challenge here because it's hard to turn on film and look at my guys, because and so what I did was I went and Well, Stank played the most snaps of anybody on the football team last year.
Yeah.
I mean, so he's easy to find, you know. But I can look at him and him only on there. So what I did was went back through all the games, and I found probably 120 snaps at the end of games, and there weren't a ton of those because some games were really close, you know, to the end, where the other guys got in. And I found, and then I went back and I got the video crew to cut me a bunch of scrimmage and drill workout from last fall.
Practice film.
So I ended up having probably about 250 reps to look at of the guys that hadn't been on the field yet.
Okay. Is that enough? Do you get a good feel from that?
Yeah, I mean, to get a feel.
Okay.
But then, and here's what you got to think about too, is that, yeah, I got a feel for them, but just like an evaluation, a lot of those guys were true freshmen in here, or redshirt freshmen, and so you don't want to look at and say, well, he can't play, he can play, he can, you know.
Right.
You know, you get a feel for it, and then I also talked to everybody that touched them. In other words, all the, you know, Ron and Larry got their opinions. Dick Anderson and I are good friends. They came down to Texas and visited us as a staff at one time, and Dick spent a week with me, so we got to be good friends. So when I came in, met with Dick a long time about the kids and got his opinion. But then at the same time, I took all the opinions, and some of they pretty well were on the same mark about all the kids. But there were a few conflicting stories. But then, so I got those just to have some history on them.
Right.
But then make my own decisions.
Right.
You know, because I don't want, like I told all the kids, this for Stank, it'll be the hardest transition because he's established.
Right.
And he knew the other offense and all that.
You keep him at center though, I'm assuming.
Right now he is at center. He can certainly play guard. He has before.
Right.
And my philosophy is to play the best 5 offensive linemen.
Yeah.
So if somebody else emerges that really all he could play is center or is better at center, then I can move Stank. It gives me some flexibility to move him if I have to.
Sitting here right now, do you have a rough idea of who
I've
you'd
got
like
a
to?
rough idea, but I'm really not at a point where we want to get into that yet because I'm still, you know, we've got a little over a month before we start spring practice, and like I told those guys, it's an evaluation deal every day. I mean, you're competing to get in that top 5 every day, you know, and you will once we start too.
Do you take into account the stuff that you see out on the, you know,
Absolutely.
when they're running out there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's all part of it. And we'll start the depth chart as with a lot of factors. We'll start, obviously, what they've accomplished in the past.
Okay.
What I've seen in the off-season program from them.
Okay.
You know, and we'll go from there. And like I told them, if you're the first day, if you're number 1, don't get all think you've arrived. Right. And if you're number 3, don't get depressed about that either, because we got to start someplace, and then we'll move from there.
Are you anxious for the beginning of spring practice?
Oh, sure, yeah. I'm glad we have a little time because we're just now got all the staff together, you know, and we've got a long way to go in our being totally knowledgeable about what we're doing, and you know we've got to get there before we can get it to the kids. So I'm glad we have a little time, but I am anxious to get started.